Greetings, everyone. This video is going to focus on the annotated bibliography task. So I am going to go to that task and open the shared document that we're working on. And for this video, I'm going to focus on the Jackson Mindful Writing text because that's the text we're supposed to be reading collaboratively. So you will have a link to a Google Doc. I'm going to open that document. In that document, you should see your last name, and you will be assigned, you've already been assigned a specific chapter to read. So the idea is that we're not going to, everyone doesn't have to read this whole book. Now the book is valuable, but in order for us, one, to practice collaborative learning and working together, I divvied up the book. So everyone has to read the first chapter. I said, except me, but nope, I'm reading the first chapter too. So everyone in the class is assigned chapter one. Basically, you have 3 chapters. Chapter 1, and then you scroll through the list, and then you will see the chapter you've been assigned. And everyone is going to be assigned to read the last chapter. So you will have 3 chapters that you are supposed to read, but that will still mean we have access to the whole book because the middle chapters are spread out across your classmates. So everyone, including me, so I'm reading the first chapter and the last chapter as well. So what you're going to do is do your reading, take your notes, which you should have been doing since the anchor texts were assigned some weeks ago. You're supposed to start reading. I posted earlier what you're reading for. So here we are trying to get our annotations together. So I'm going to show you what I did for chapter 1 and my process I use for when I'm annotating and trying to take notes in general. Okay, so on the screen is an email I sent to myself and the screenshots I took of my text, just so I can show you the notes that I took. This is all annotating, just taking notes, gathering information. So I'm reading to understand. I'm not reading for pleasure, so I'm taking a lot of notes. So there's an example of my handwritten notes. It took me 25 minutes to read this chapter while actively engaging by taking those notes. So it took me 25 minutes. And then it took me probably another 5 to 10 minutes to write my summary, which like I said, I emailed to myself. So I'm going to copy this summary and put it into our shared document. So here I am inside our shared document. This is going to be an ugly document. I mean, it's not a pretty process. Learning sometimes is an ugly process. But so I'm going to go ahead and just add my name so people know this was me. To add my last name and my annotation, or my summary. That's a kind of annotation we are all doing. So for the Jackson text, I'm just asking you to add the summary, which is what are the key ideas. I don't want people adding that reflective learning because that's just your personal reflective learning. And you will only need to do that for the 3 chapters that you read. So I'm going to just copy and paste from my email. Hopefully this works. And it's there, but apparently it's in a visible ink. So it's in white. So I'm going to have to change the font so that we can see it. My font color. Okay, I'm going to pause this video. All right, that's the first thing that I need to change. So, okay, so there is my version. So what I expect to see is a long list of your versions. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of people's version here. And the idea is that everyone will contribute. And then from what's there, we will then be able to summarize the book with the best that everyone was able to bring. It also helps me see what you are pulling from the text. So this is a trust issue. Do not read what's already here. Just go ahead and read the text and post your summaries for your annotation. And then we'll get a long list. We're going to have everybody for chapters 1 and 13, and then there'll probably only be 2 or 3 people assigned the other chapters. So that is my first part of the video. And this second part of the video, I want to just show you a bit more about my process. Okay, so this part of the video, I'm going to take you back to my beginning. And as I said, when you're reading to annotate, you're looking for information, and it's your responsibility as the reader, writer, researcher, whatever role you have, to know what it is you're looking for. So for the annotated bibliography task, if you're doing the short assignment that you're doing with the resources that you're given for class, your goal is to summarize the content in what you're reading. And then the second part of that is to write that reflective paragraph of how what you read helps you specifically. So you're doing 2 things. What I'm going to talk about right now is just, again, using the Jackson text in our collective annotations, our collective summary. So that's the goal, is to what is the content in this chapter. And if someone else were to get a hold of our annotated bibliography, the summary should give them an idea of what's going on. So in order to do that, you need to do some sort of mindful or active reading. And if you own the text in a paper copy, you can write in the text if it's yours. So if it's written, so when I do this process for books or texts that I don't own, or if they're on the computer and I can't download to copy them and write directly on the screen, I would just take handwritten notes. So my handwritten note version would be, I would usually look at the number of paragraphs on this page, and then I would write what's called like an outline, and I just number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there are 9 paragraphs on this page. I'd write 1 through 9. And as I read through them, for each paragraph I'm in, I would make either a sentence, a phrase, or a note about what the content is in that particular paragraph. And then that will help me know what are the main ideas here. Another way you can do this is if there are titles. So like, this is a title, you are a writer. You can also change that into a question. Are you a writer, or how are you a writer? And then if you can answer that question based on the content that's in the section or that you're reading, you have a summary. All right, so those are 2 additional techniques or strategies you can use when you're looking to take some active notes. So what I do, because I own this text, I just write on everything. So I use a combination of underlining, circling, and actually writing notes. And our book is set up very, well, at least this chapter, very nicely, that the author, Jackson, uses a number system. So in this first paragraph, basically, Jackson tells us that, hey, everybody's already a writer, talks about the things that people tend to write: text messages, emails, lecture notes. So if you write anything, you should give yourself a break and say, yo, I'm already a writer because I write various kinds of documents. So that's the first rule. And he also lists that first rule here by saying the first rule, the first great truth of writing is you're already a writer. And then the second rule, which he outlines, is here comes the second great truth. And the second great truth is that people get better at writing by writing. So I know that's the main point of these next several paragraphs. So these paragraphs are going to elaborate on how do you get better at writing by writing. So the main idea, the topic here, is getting better at writing by writing. And then all these paragraphs are going to elaborate, develop that. And so I'm just going through and looking for what are the key ideas. And so I look for the topic of the supporting paragraphs. So I'm going to go to the next section here that I scribbled all over. And what I have here is the key points. I like the fact that he uses, LeBron James as an example, but I shouldn't put that in my summary, because that's just him using a very, he hopes, or Jackson, yeah, Brian, he hopes is going to get the reader's attention, but I'm not going to cite LeBron James because I know that's just a technique he's using to help me understand how practice works. So what I did get, though, is that people, you may have some talent at writing, but you still will need to practice. And then practice includes things like fundamentals. And then I have a question, like, what are the writing fundamentals? And then I might want to take note of that. And then he also points out that what we are learning in class or a college course, then that's over here on page 5. What we're learning in class is not how to do all the types of writing. Class is actually practice for learning how to engage in different types of writing. And it's a place where you're going to practice skills and put those skills and strategies into your toolbox so that in your personal life and your professional life, as you get past the classroom, from the classroom, you will leave hopefully with skills that you can use to figure out future writing. And so classroom is the place where we practice, and we practice different types of writing, and that helps us get better. So got all that. And then he gives us the third great truth. And that's another point, like here, I wrote number 3. So the third great truth is that you have to think about what you're doing, which he calls mindful writing. And also lets us know the technical term for that is metacognition. And remember, I'm reading this like an instructor. So I'm thinking like, hey, a lot of the things I do in class that students sometimes don't like or care for is actually try to get you to be mindful. So for example, having you write a draft review memo is a mindful practice. Like, go back and look at the process. Where are you going? What kind of choices that you make? So the third great truth is mindfulness. Now that should probably, these great truths should be in the summary because they're the main points. So this is where he introduces in the middle of page 5, the third great truth about be mindful about your writing. And then everything that follows that are paragraphs of information that's going to elaborate on it. So if I could ask, as I read through this chapter, 3 major questions which will help me summarize what is, what makes people, why are people all already writers? That's the first one. That's because you write things. And he gives some examples. How do writers get better at writing? By writing. So I can change the second great truth into a question, and I can change this third great truth into a question and use the content that follows to answer it. All right, then we have pages 6 and 7. I'm thinking, and he talks quite a bit about practice. So practice gets about 2.5 pages of content, but mindfulness gets like it gets the most content in this chapter. So that means it's probably a significant concept that we should want to make sure we summarize in our point, because he spends so much time on mindfulness from page 5 nearly all the way to the end. So that means it's probably important to pay attention to. And then what we get for mindfulness are the actions that you do. And then we get this list of 4 things that are involved in the activities of being mindful, thinking about the writing that you do. And then here on page 6, towards the end, this word here that you can barely see, summary, it says summary, but this is why I realized he's summarizing what he's told us already. and it reads, so writing improvement is mindful. If you're looking for a fancier way to say that, we can call it metacognition, thinking about thinking. Metacognition is central to learning about thinking in order to monitor and control our powers to act. And then he cites the source there. So then on page 7, this is more about how writers needs to focus on in the process of mindfulness and understanding something called knowledge domains, which I realize now I didn't keep in my summary, which hopefully some of you will add to my summary. And then the idea here is, after looking at everyone's attempt at summarizing the key points, I can go back to see what's there. And then from that, I can draw the best, most concise summary of this content. Again, we're not shooting for a summary that is as long as the chapter. We want a summary that contains the major points. And right now, I'm seeing that as 4 great truths. And within those great truths, there are specific areas of subjects that Jackson elaborates on. And that is what should be in our summary somehow. And then we have that section that he, on page 7 through the end, that he talks about knowledge domains and what they are. And there are 5 of them. And I did not include this in my summary either. So there are some gaps in my summary, but that's why this is a collective activity, so we can get better at it. So as I go to page 9 and 10 here, no, page 8 and 9, we get those 5 domains, and he defines them. Now, I don't want to define all of them, and I might just say, under ways to improve and how to be mindful, there are 4 practices that you should stop and think about what you're doing, and that would be planning, practicing, revising, reflecting on page 6. And then additionally, there is learning about specific areas of knowledge, and he calls those knowledge domains, and that's on page 7 and 8. All right, so all of my writing here. And on page 9, my main point here that I got from this is that we should relax as writers, because everything he's talking about in this chapter about mastery, we can't master and we can't expect ourselves to master that. So relax a little bit, because this is a learning process and it takes a long time to improve what we're doing. But if we're mindful and are paying attention to the opportunity we get, like in a classroom, to practice these, we can then get better. And then the last 2 pages, I have fewer comments here because I pretty much most of this for me was just him restating some other general things about learning, and I got most of that. What I actually started to focus on this page was how Jackson used other sources. So along the middle spine of my book here, these 2 words that you can't read, this is the word I use, cited. So one of the other things I do when I'm reading is look at how other writers do the tasks and the actions I should be doing. So how has Jackson cited sources in his own text? So I write the word cited next to them, and then I can go back and look to see how this writer uses a documentation style. Like, how did he cite other sources to make himself sound credible? So by the time I got to this page, I was actually looking at how Jackson was putting together his piece and giving myself some notes for that. And then over here on the last page, I wrote MLA style, because I noticed that Jackson is using MLA style in the text of his document when he's citing sources and on his works cited page. So I now have another example for how to incorporate sources using MLA style. And I also know that even a professional writer is citing other sources. And so this is my scribble scrabble of how I annotate a text if I actually have a print copy of it. And from this, like I said, it took me 25 minutes to do what you see on the screen. From that, I wrote my first draft of the summary, and I added that to our shared document. And that concludes this video about the annotated collective collaborative activity.